Hey guys, in this video the lovely Mr. B is going to be taking you through expanding double brackets. Now in this video there are 15 examples worked through at 3 different levels, and if you look at the pinned comment that will take you through where the levels change. Now you can jump in and out of this wherever you feel comfortable. If you're pretty confident, start at the medium ones, and if you find them too easy then jump to the harder ones later on. There are loads more questions waiting for you over on my website.
Having a look at expanding double brackets. Now, if you haven't already, go and watch the video on expanding single brackets because the methods here are very similar. So just like with single brackets, the first thing we're going to do is we'll try and multiply everything together, and we'll use arrows to keep track of where we're up to. So the first item in the first bracket will be multiplied by the first item in the second bracket. That number will also be multiplied by the second number in the second bracket. Now, once you multiply the first number in the first bracket, we do exactly the same thing with the second number. So the second number in the first bracket is going to be multiplied by the first number in the second bracket, and then that number is going to be multiplied by the second number in the second bracket. And if we do these 4 multiplications that are shown by the 4 arrows, then we multiplied everything by everything else. The only things we don't multiply are numbers in the same bracket. So I'm going to start off with the green arrow first, which starts at an x and ends at an x. So that'll be x multiplied by x, which would be x squared. So I'm going to write a little time sign on the green arrow just so I know that I've multiplied those two together and that arrow is done. Then I'm going to move on to the purple arrow above. So that'll be x times 7, which would be 7x. And again, put a little multiply sign on, so let yourself know that you've handled that arrow. Now I'll do the purple arrow at the bottom. 4 times x is 4x, and again a little x to let me know I've done that. And the final arrow is the pink arrow, 4 times 7, which is 28, and then I'll label that I've done that one as well. Always have a quick look at the end. You should always have answers, and you should have your 4 arrows marked off. So we have x squared plus 7x plus 4x plus 28. Now we're not actually finished, because if you look at the answer you might notice that we have a plus 7x and we have a plus 4x, and they are like terms. They're the same kind of thing. We've got a squared sign, the x squared. We've got an integer, the 28, but the 7x and the 4x, they sound similar. They've both got an x on. We can add these together. 7x's plus 4x's is 11x's. So our final answer, we write down our squared terms, x squared. We write down our x terms, 11x's, and we write down our integer term, 28. Now we can't add any of these together because 11x and 28, they're different things. You've got an x value, you've got a integer, x squared 11x, same thing. X squared has got 2 x's multiplied together, 11x only got 1x, so they can't be multiplied. So it's got to be the same thing that are added together. So let's try the same thing with question 2. Set up the arrows first. The first number in the first bracket we've multiplied by both numbers in the second bracket, and then the second number in the first bracket we multiplied by both numbers in the second bracket. It's always going to follow that pattern. So the green arrow first starts at an x, ends at an x. X times x is x squared. Then the purple starts at an x, ends at a 6. X times 6 is 6x. Then the purple arrow at the bottom starts at a 4, ends at an x. 4 times x is 4x. Then the pink arrow starts at a 4, ends at a 6. 4 times 6 is 24. Always check if you can combine like terms. So write your x squared term first. X squared, I've got one of those. For the x terms, we've got 2. The 6x and the 4x. So 6x plus 4x will give us 10x. And then write your integer term last. If you do mix these up for any reason, as long as you've got those 3 answers in any order, you'll still get the correct answer, but this is the order you're going to see on mark schemes and answers from your teachers. Moving on to question 3, again, set up the same process. So the first and the first of both brackets multiplied together, and the first and the last. Then we go to the second number in the first bracket, the second and the first, and the second and the second. Then we'll go through the colours one by one. Green arrow, x times x is x squared. The purple arrow at the top, x times 4 is 4x. Purple arrow at the bottom, 1 times x is 1. So we just write x for that, and 1 times 4 for the pink arrow will give us 4. Then check through what you've got and write your final answer. X squared terms first. I have one of those, x squared. X terms second. 4x plus x is 5x. And the integer term last, we have a 4. Moving on to question 4. Again, let's set up the arrows. First and first, first and last. Then the second and first, and the second and last. Green arrow first, x multiplied by x is x squared. You'll notice that all these questions have x squared at the start. Then we have x times 4 is 4x. Then we have 6 times x is 6x. And then we have 6 times 20. Write down the x squared terms. Add together the x terms. 4 plus 6 is 10x. And then add on the integer term. And you'll notice for every single question, it's always 2 x terms that you add together. The x squareds are always the same, and the integers at the ends are always the same. Now, one extra detail here, you'll notice the answer to question 4 is exactly the same as the answer to question 2. And what's the difference in the questions? Well, the brackets are written the other way around. So what we're seeing here is that it doesn't matter which way around the brackets are, you're going to get the same answer. And it's because the brackets being multiplied together, and no matter which way you multiply something, then you're going to get the same answer. Now, we use a bit of a shortcut for the last question. Every single question said x squared at the start. Every single question had something x, and every single question had an integer at the end. So I've got a gap for what's on the x and a gap for the integer. Now, for every single question, you'll notice that the integer is just the 2 numbers in the brackets multiplied together. So 5 times 1 is going to give me 5. And then you might have noticed that the number on the x is the 2 numbers in the brackets added together. And you can check that in all the previous questions. For example, the first one, we've got a 4 and it's 11x their answer. 4 plus 7 is 11. So with that in mind, I've got a 5 and a 1 in the brackets. So 5 plus 1 would give me a 6. So when you get set to get confident, you can find little shortcuts like this, where the number on the x is the 2 numbers in the brackets added together, and the number on the end, the integer, is the 2 numbers multiplied together. Moving on to the medium question. Now notice we're starting to get negative signs in the brackets. Now, nothing to panic about. It's going to be exactly the same method. It's going to be very, very careful with negative numbers when we're multiplying. Now, given that this will be a bit more complicated, I'm not going to try and do any shortcuts until the end. So I'm just going to do the full method just to make sure I'm not making any mistakes with negative numbers. So set up the same way. The first and the first multiplied together, and the first and the second, then the second and the first multiplied together, and the second and the second. Green arrow first, x times x is x squared. Then the purple arrow, x times 5 is 5x. Now, this is where you can be very, very careful with negative numbers. Now, this was a positive x multiplied by a negative 5, and those negative symbols always belong with a number after them, with a positive and a negative. Now, a little key might be helpful here, and this is always helpful with negative numbers. So a positive and a positive makes a positive and a negative makes a negative, and a negative and a negative makes a positive. They cancel out. So using our key, a positive times a negative would be a negative, so it's a negative 5x. Now let's look at the arrows at the bottom. So first we've got the purple arrow, 6 times x would be 6x. Now both of those are positive, there's no negative symbols on the 6 or the x, so that'll be a positive 6x. Then let's look at the numbers. 6 times 5 is 30, but then look at the symbols, it's a positive 6 and a negative 5. So a positive and a negative is a negative. It'll be negative 30. Two middle terms with the x's on them can be combined. So we have our x squared term first. And again, be very careful with the negative symbols. They belong with the number after them. It's a negative 5 and we have a positive 6. Positive symbols belong with the number after them. So take away 5 and add 6. You can always read it the other way around. It makes more sense as well. 6 take away 5 would be 1. That is our answer. It's 1x. But if you could be negative numbers, then a negative 5 plus a 6 will give you a positive 1. Finally, we have the integer. So take away 30 and that's our answer. So we can see we actually have negative numbers in our answer as well as the question. So let's try that again with question 2. Set up the arrows first. So the first and the first, the first and the last, the second and the first, and the second and the last. I would always suggest writing these arrows. It just helps you keep up and not miss out any of the answers. So let's go green arrow first. X times x is x squared. Then it's purple arrow. X times negative 3 would be 3x. But then we've got that negative in there with a positive and a negative. We'll make it a negative 3x. Then the purple arrow at the bottom. 7 times x is 7x. They're both positive. You're going to be very cautious around negative numbers. And then 7 times 3 is 21 for the pink arrow. Then look at the symbols. A positive and a negative would make a negative. You'll notice I'm writing the number down first and the sign second. That's because no matter what symbols you've got, positive or negative, in any combination, it's always going to be, for example, 21 for 7 times 3. It's just a question and it's not going to be a positive or negative 21. So let's write down our final answer. Our x squared term, our x term, negative 3 plus 7, which would be a positive 4x. Alternatively, you can read it the other way around. 7x take away 3x is 4x. Same answer. Question 3 has the negative sign on the other bracket, but again, it'll be the same method. So we're going to do the first and first, first and last, second and first, and second and last multiplied together. So start with the green arrow. X times x is x squared. Then x times a positive 2 would be positive 2x. Then negative 4 times x will be negative 4. Then negative 4 times 2 would be negative 8. So now I'm getting a bit confident. I'm speeding up a little bit. X squared term first for the final answer. Then the x terms, and we have 2x take away 4x, which would be negative 2x. And then we have the negative 8. Was there any differences because the takeaway sign was in a different bracket? No, did everything the same. I suppose it might have been a bit easier just to read from left to right when you're combining the two x terms together. But you can swap those around if you need to anyway, so that's not a problem. Now for question 4, both brackets have got negatives in, but again, we'll do the same method. So draw your arrows first, always in the same pattern, and just to help you not miss anything out. So the green arrow first, x times x is x squared. Then the purple arrow, x times negative 4 is negative 4x. Then the lower purple arrow, negative 8 times x is negative 8x. And then the pink arrow, negative 8 times negative 4. Now, 4 times 8 would be 32. And a negative times a negative, if you look at the key, would be a positive. So it'll be a positive 32. So let's do our final answer. We have the x squared. And the one change we have here is when we combine the two x terms, they're both negative. So we have negative 4 take away 8. Now, when I'm saying a negative and negative is a positive, they've got to be either touching for a plus or take away, or they've got to be part of a multiplication and a divide. Because these two negative symbols are away from each other, then we're not going to be using the key. It's just negative 4 take away another 8. That would be negative 12x. And negative gives you an even bigger negative. Then we've got the 32 at the end, and there's our final answer. Now confident with negative numbers, let's try and use a shortcut for the final answer. So we know we're going to have x squared. Discussing the easy questions that the middle term with the x on it, you're going to have to add together the two numbers. So it's going to be the -2 plus the -5. And then for the number at the end, you're going to have to multiply them. So it'll be -2 times -5. So let's add together first. -2 plus a -5. Now a plus and a minus in the key is a minus, so it's -2 minus another 5, which will be minus 7x. Then for the multiplication, -2 times -5, two negatives in the key is a positive, so that would be a positive 10. So again, the shortcut is that you have to multiply two numbers in the brackets for the last number, and you have to add the two numbers in the brackets for the middle number. Moving on to the hard questions now, and you'll notice we now have more numbers in the brackets, but there's still two terms in each bracket, even though there's extra numbers. So we're going to still use the same method. So with question 1, and we're going to match up the first number in the first bracket with the first number in the second bracket and multiply those. The first number in the first bracket and the second number in the second bracket. The second number in the first bracket with the first number in the second bracket, and then the second number in the second bracket and the first and the second number in the first bracket. So again, it's exactly the same pattern we've been using all along. So let's start off with an arrow, and it starts at 3x and ends in x, so it's 3x times x. To split it up into two parts, do the numbers first, and we've just got a 3. So let's write 3 down. And once you've done the letters, and once you've done the numbers, do the letters. So we have x times x, which is x squared. This is going to work because we don't know the value of the x, so whatever the x squared is, it's not going to affect the 3 until we actually know what the x is. Now let's look at the upper purple arrow. We have 3x times 6. So again, numbers first. 3 times 6 is 18. Then look at the letters. We have an x in the question in 3x, and we don't have any x's in the 6, so we've just got one x in there. Now look at the purple arrow below, and it's 1 times x is 1x, and then the pink arrow, 1 times 6 is 6. Now again, just like the previous questions, the middle two terms with the x's on can be combined. So for the final answer, we'll have our x squared term, 3x squared. So for the harder questions, this will have a number on it. Then our middle term, 18x plus 1x would be 19x. And then at the end, we've got the plus 6. So it's the same method. You just have to take care of some extra numbers in your multiplications. So let's try question 2. Set up the arrows first, always in the same pattern. Do the arrows one at a time. So green first, 2x times 2x. Do the numbers first. 2 times 2 is 4. Then the letters, x times x is x squared. Next we have 2x times 5. 2 times 5 is 10, and then we've got an x in the question, so it would be 10x. Again, do the numbers and letters separately. Then on the bottom, we've got 3 times 2x, so 3 times 2 is 6, and we have an x. And then the pink arrow last, 3 times 5 is 15. Write down your final answer, so the x squared term, 4x squared. Combine the two x terms, 10x plus 6x is 16x, and then add on the integer term at the end. Moving on to question 3, I can see we have negative numbers involved again, but it's going to be exactly the same as it was in the medium questions. I've put my key at the top of the page. I must be a little bit careful with negative symbols. Set up the arrows in the same way. Always important to do this. A lot of students will only do 2 multiplications and miss out on almost all the marks. Drawing the arrows ensures you do get all 4 answers. So green first, 2x times x, so 2, and then x times x is x squared. And we'd have 2x times negative 1, so 2 times 1 is 2. X in there, and then with the symbols, we've got a positive 2x and a negative 1. A positive and a negative would be a negative. It's negative 2x. Then we've got 3 times x is 3x, and we've got 3 times negative 1. 3 times 1 is 3, but a positive and a negative makes a negative 3 for us. Produce our final answer. We've got 2x squared. Combine the x terms, a negative 2x plus 3x would bring us up to 1x. You could read it the other way around to help. 3x take away 2x is 1x. Then at the end, we have the -3. Now moving on to question 4. So in set up the arrows. Now when you get confident, you don't need to color code everything. So I'll just do these in the same color now. And you should get into kind of a routine of how to do this, the order, and so you won't need the colors to go through step by step. So I'm going to do 3x times x is 3x squared. Then 3x times -8. So 3 times 8 is 24. We have the x, and it's a positive and a negative, will give us a negative. Look at the bottom now. So 8 times x is 8x, and 8 times negative times 8 is 64, and a positive and a negative will give us a negative. Let's combine those middle two terms. So it'll be 3x squared. Negative 24 plus 8 would be negative 16x. And then the takeaway 64. Now, the final question I'm using for the easy and medium questions at the end. Now, this shortcut gets very complicated at this point. I would just suggest actually just using the 4 arrows and doing it that way. But I will take a look at the shortcut. Now, the whole thing that's going on here is that we have the 2 in the bracket. What this 2 does is it's going to multiply the number in the opposite bracket by 2. So it's not going to be a -4, it's going to be a -8 for the purposes of the shortcut. So we know we're going to have an x squared term. We know we're going to have an x term. We know that with the x term, it's the 2 numbers in the brackets added together. So it's going to be -6 plus -8. Okay, it's not -4. Remember, because we've got the extra 2 in the bracket, then we're going to have to multiply the one at the opposite side by it. That's going to give 14x. Then the number at the end is the 2 numbers multiplied together. So that is going to be -6. And this is going to be multiplied by -4. So this will give us -24. You see, this is confusing because I haven't actually multiplied it by 2 because the x's have nothing to do with getting the integer. So that 2 being on the x isn't actually going to do anything for us. Finally, we do need a number on that x at the start, and it's probably just best just to do the multiplication. 2x times x is 2x. So you can see I can use a range of shortcuts to do these in a more quick way, to not need any working out. But I hope you can see that actually it was a lot clearer with the first 4 questions, just doing it with the 4 steps. So I strongly suggest you do that every single time. You know, shortcuts maybe if you're doing 10, 20 sets of questions. But on an exam, do it in detail, make sure you get the right answer.